So I had the opportunity to lead a lesson design institute with specialized secondary programs from the California Department of Education. And this is a really unique program that's actually funded through legislation. And what happens here is teachers from across the state of California apply to basically get seed funding for a great classroom idea, course, or program that they have. In turn, they get a couple $100,000 as well as support to implement this new program. And this program is going to have to become self-sustaining, and teachers will have to share the entire curriculum that is designed publicly. And the within the training, we did some of the integrated ELD that you saw last week, and then we also go through UDL. So I'm going to go through just kind of like a higher level overview of what the UDL looks like to support you with your own assignment. So when we look at UDL, we're really looking at this through the lens of removing barriers for learners. And this means that we're looking at it through the lens of are there barriers and challenges with related to engagement, meaning that how students engage in the learning process? Are there barriers in the learning environment with how students access the representation, meaning that learners differ in how they perceive and make meaning of information? And then finally, are there barriers in how students engage with action and expression, how they navigate the learning environment? And again, all of this is not to look at it through the lens of like, this is what the student needs, but rather what are the barriers, the known barriers that we know that students face in the class as a single student and as a collective student, and then how could we overcome those barriers? Because if we identify them as barriers, it means that they're there and they are removable. So we're gonna first look at this through the lens of Alex. Alex, he has trouble staying motivated in class and buying into the curriculum. He does read on grade level and he understands the content well, and he can write and he can share his ideas at grade level, but struggles using academic language. Now, if I look at this through the lens of UDL, it says he has trouble staying motivated in class and buying into the curriculum. Well, that definitely means that he has some challenges with engagement. Could it be that he needs his interest and identity welcomed within the lesson? Does he need support with sustaining effort and persistence? Does he have challenges or barriers related to emotional capacity? And that's, that would generally fall under here under engagement. It says he reads on grade level and he understands the content well. So that means he doesn't really have challenges with representation. Again, whether he's reading, however the information's coming, he understands it. And he doesn't need support there. So there's no barriers here. However, he can write and share his ideas at grade level, but he struggles using academic language. So that's now something that has to do with action and expression. So if we look at it through the lens of action and expression, I could look around here and I could say, let's see, use multiple media for communication. Let's see, use multiple tools for construction, composition, and creativity, build fluencies, address biases, set meaningful goals, anticipate and plan for challenges. So I know that he struggles using academic language, so I can anticipate and plan for those challenges. Maybe I'm using some type of like paragraph frame, or using maybe some type of like a word bank with some of the academic language, or because I know that I'm anticipating that's happening, maybe I front load some of that information. Let's see, organize information and resources. So maybe that's using a graphic organizer, etc. So when I look at it again through the lens of barriers, I know that this is kind of the profile or that fits Alex based off of my experience as his teacher or as the person supporting him. And so I know that I have to tap into here into engagement, and then for action and expression, I'm going to be down here to support him. Oops. Oops. Now, if I look at it, now the next exercise that we did is working with teachers. We kind of came up with different strategies, like 3 potential strategies that we would have used with Alex to support him to be more successful in the class. You could pause it and look at kind of some of the ideas that they came up there. Now we're going to look at it through the lens of Cindy. Cindy's a very high achieving student. She easily completes her work at or above grade level. She has very little motivation to extend her own learning and exploring topics, and she avoids sharing in groups or to the class. So if we look at Cindy through the lens of what barriers she's facing, she's a very high achieving student. Well, that means that very easily she can, bring in the information, and in many ways she could even express it, express it enough to show mastery. However, she has very little motivation to extend her own learning and exploring topics. So, is that something that we need to welcome interest and identities, potentially sustaining effort and persistence? I mean, not really, because she's able to show mastery of it, so it wouldn't be here. Emotional capacity, recognizing expectation, beliefs, and motivation. So that's potentially something that we can do. So when we look and we realize that she has little motivation to extend her own learning, it either has to do with emotional capacity, so there's strategies that we can pull from there, or it has to do with welcoming interest and identities, so there's strategies that we can pull from here. But then this last one here is interesting. It says she avoids sharing in groups or to the class. So that means that although she gets her work done, there are some challenges here with action and expression. So there's potential here for us to to remove some of those barriers, either here through expression and communication, um, build fluencies with graduated support for performance and practice, address biases related to modes of expression and communication, strategy development, set meaningful goals, anticipate and plan for challenges, organize information and resources. So again, different ways that we could address it, but very different barriers and needs than Alex. And then here are some of the unique strategies that teachers came up with. They said, hey, teaching other students, maybe younger students, to develop skills, develop awareness of self and others, communicate her impact on the group's work, suggest that the work develop more through contributions of all the members, promote individual and collective reflection, progress reports, reflective notes, etc., etc. And then these are other strategies that teachers came up with in separate groups. So now I'm going to look at it through a third student. This is Joe. And Joe actually works very well with teams. So that's opposite of Alex and Cindy. He's very sociable and respected by other students. However, he has trouble understanding the content, but he always makes a great effort. So let's see, he works very well in teams. So that means he doesn't really have any problems with engagement. Very sociable and respected by other students. Again, no problems with engagement. Has trouble understanding the content, but always makes a great effort. So he's going to do his best, but he doesn't quite get it. And so there's different ways here that are potentially there's different things here that are a potential challenge for him. So is it, language and symbols? Is it building knowledge that he has challenges with? And that's something that as a teacher, you kind of have to be able to dig in a little bit deeper. But he doesn't really have challenges with action and expression. So different things that kind of strategies that teachers had said was, strategies, graphic organizer, step-by-step processes, small chunks, offering multiple ways to show the work in his own expressive way, tapping into a social nature by encouraging team-centered around a game. For example, having students play Monopoly during economics lesson, or robber barons, etc. So these are all different strategies that different teachers from across the state came up with how they would support Joe. Now, when we step back and we look at the bigger picture, we see Alex, Cindy, Joe, they all have their unique challenges. And we came up with, we were hoping to have 3 strategies to potentially help each one. But if you're in a classroom, if you're teaching or if you're coaching teachers, it becomes problematic when we're saying, okay, you're going to do these 3 things for Alex, these 3 things for Cindy, these 3 things for Joe. Especially if you have, 25, 30 plus kids in your class, how are you possibly removing barriers for all the students? So what we consider here as the pro tip is select 1 or 2 strategies that could be the most impactful in your own class. And then as you grow, you can add or adjust these tools in your repertoire. So when we look at Alex, we see team name for groups and a brand for competition. So that was kind of to motivate him. Stories that connect to the meaning and the goal, explaining the why and the relevance. Assigning roles, allowing the team to pick roles in student-led discussions. We could even step back a little bit further and we could be like, well, these 2, assigning roles, team names, etc., those 2 kind of go together, and they're almost like a low-hanging fruit that you could implement. When we look at Cindy, put her in a group and give her a purpose, that's actually very close here to assigning roles and student-led discussions. Encourage Cindy to share her thoughts with the team. You could see how that would go pretty well as well with fostering collaboration and interdependence. Give Cindy different communication. So that one's a little bit different. But what you see here is that these first two with Cindy are very closely related to Alex. But remember that Cindy and Alex had very different barriers. So even though they both had very different barriers, some of the strategies that we're identifying are strategies that support both Alex and Cindy. And then we go down here with Joe, and Joe's a little bit more of an outlier. So Joe clarify vocabulary symbols and language structures, support the decoding of text, mathematical notation and symbols, foster collaboration, independence, and collective learning. And so now we've reached something here where when we're looking at the team dynamic, fostering collaboration and interdependence, that's something that fits the need of all three of them. So if you're a teacher and you have these different unique needs in your class and students that are having some challenges and struggling a little bit, that's the best approach that you can take. You can start out by implementing something that you know is going to fit across the board specifically for the students that you might be having some challenges with. And then again, you could select one or two strategies that would be the most impactful in your class. And then as you grow, you can add or adjust these tools in your own repertoire. So now this week you have two different activities. They're both going to go underneath the UDL activity, but you're gonna address first through the lens of UDL um, some of the strategies, the guidelines that you'd be able to use. So I'm encouraging you to use the exact same standard that you had last week. So again, remember I was using that TikTok lesson. And then you're going to list any of the barriers that exist within your current learning environment or with students that you've worked with. So you could kind of create your own scenario if you're not currently in a class. And so my barrier number one is I have students have challenges staying on task and often complain that the work is boring. The second barrier that I have is the majority of students are reading 1 to 2 grade levels below. And then barrier number 3 is that the majority of students are writing 1 to 2 grade levels below. So then what I did is I used, I added the specific consideration, the specific guideline. The guidelines are here. They're also linked they're also going to be linked there for you on Canva. So you could see which ones I got. So for example, here 7.2 is the specific one, 7.3, 7.4. You could pick which one. So here for this barrier, students have challenges staying on task and often complain the work is boring. 7.2, I can optimize relevance, joy, and authenticity by having students choose from a variety of print and digital sources on social media that are of interest to them. So you're going to tell me which consideration you're using, but also how you're using it. So for me, I'm specifically selecting different sources on social media, and that was kind of the TikTok video and some of the resources that are there. Here, the majority of students are reading 1 to 2 grade levels below, and then you're going to tell us, well, you can pre-teach vocabulary related to digital literacy and the content of the social media videos before and during the lesson. So I'm basically making like a lot of my academic vocabulary around digital literacy very specific to the TikTok videos that we're watching and then showing them how to apply it. And then barrier number 3, the majority of students are writing 1 to 2 grade levels below. So I selected 2.2. And I can have students use text to speech to start the writing process. And I can also provide guided templates in Google Docs with sentence starters and transition words built in. And that's how I'm addressing like those barriers specific to my class. Now, you do have one more activity that you're going to be using. And this is based off of the Samr model. There's an article there that you will have read, and it's a really solid framework that helps you understand like how you're integrating technology within the lesson. Oops. So Samr stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. So if I'm looking at the lesson through the lens of this standard, let's see, gather relevant information from multiple print and digital sources using search terms effectively, assess the credibility and accuracy of each source, and quote or paraphrase the data and conclusions of others while avoiding plagiarism and following a standard format for citation. So if I'm just going to use technology as a substitute, what would that look like? And again, this is based off of the article that you should have read. Students will use Google Docs and write an opinion essay questioning the accuracy of the claims made in the TikTok video. Students will use students will use comments in the documents throughout the writing and editing process. So in this construct, substitution is just very basic and very straightforward. We used to do this on a piece of paper. Now we're going to do this in a Google Doc, and we're going to use comments. Now, if I use technology to augment the how it's integrated within the lesson, I have students using Google Docs with grammar check, commenting, using text to speech to draft and to revise their essays. So now there's a little bit more to it. Again, you could use the text to speech. Think of how that might support Joe, who had a little bit of challenges with that. That might potentially support Alex, because he had a little bit of trouble as well with the action and expression component. But the big difference here is that you have the ability to use like something like that, like text to speech, etc. Now, modification. Students writing essays in Google Docs, they embed supporting media. They could add charts, links, images, and then they share on a collaborative Padlet where peers critique credibility of sources through threaded discussions. So now this is kind of like another level, right? Because they can take their exact essay, drop it into Padlet. The essay is more interactive, charts, links, etc. And then when they post it into Padlet, other students are required to read it, look at it, and then basically evaluate the how good their argument is. And now we've definitely moved far along. Remember, up here, before even substitution, it would have been as if they just wrote a essay and submitted it. With substitution, now they're writing a document, and they're editing it online with augmentation. They're using text to speech, and they're kind of able to do the same things, except it just gives them a little bit more choice and makes it more flexible for them. With modification, though, now there's more interactive media, charts, links, images, and they're interacting with each other and discussing. Now, when we get to redefinition, that's kind of the furthest along that it could be. What I urge you is not to consider that everything could be redefinition. We can sometimes live in augmentation, we can sometimes live in modification, but definitely the most powerful is living in redefinition. And in redefinition, we have students create a multimedia fact check newsroom using Canva or Adobe Express. Their projects include podcasts, videos, infographics, which are published on the school website and shared with other local schools or classrooms. And then this allows the community to use student work as a resource for combating misinformation. So think about like the big thing that happens with redefinition is oftentimes publishing. So the key things here: podcasts, videos, infographics, sharing with the community, using it as a resource. Again, when you're way up here in substitution, like a lot of these things tend to be sequestered to the teacher. They don't really make it outside of the four walls of the classroom. Typically, when you get down here to redefinition, you're causing an action. You're breaking outside of the four walls of the classroom. So that's what you're going to be submitting for the second part of this same assignment. You're going to submit your Samr model. What would your standard look like through the substitution, through the augmentation, through the modification, through the redefinition phases? And if you have questions and you're wondering like, oh, did I do it well? Where am I? Can I improve it? Honestly, drop it into ChatGPT and then ask it how you did, or ask it to give you feedback. All right, cool. So I hope that helps. And let me know if you have any questions.